Well, we're back again to part 3 of 4 of the human body. Now we're going to talk about the cardiovascular system. The cardiovascular system consists of a pump, a set of pipes, and fluid to flow through those pipes. The pump being the heart that allows for the pumping of the blood. The vessels are the pipes of the cardiovascular system in which the blood flows through. Blood vessels leading towards the heart are known as veins. Blood vessels leading away from the heart are known as arteries. So the easiest way to remember that is away, starting with A standing for arteries. All arteries lead away from the heart. All vessels, veins, lead towards the heart. And then the fluid that is pumped around is the blood itself that brings food and oxygen to the cells and removes waste product. There's 4 chambers of the heart. The human heart has 4 chambers. The right atrium receives blood from the venous system, veins, and pumps blood to the right ventricle. The right ventricle, in turn, pumps the blood to the lungs. The left atrium receives the blood from the lungs and pumps the blood to the left ventricle. The left ventricle, being the strongest part of the heart, then pumps the blood out through the aorta to the rest of the body. Here we have a picture of the heart that shows the right pulmonary artery, which is going away from the heart. Remember, all arteries go away from the heart, and you have the right pulmonary artery leading away. You have the superior vena cava, which pumps blood to the upper part of the body. Then you have the right pulmonary veins, where the oxygenated blood is heading towards the heart. We have the right atrium. Remember this picture, if you would turn it around, you would see that what is on the right atrium would be on the right side of your body. If you're thinking of the heart in your body, the right atrium is on the right side. The right atrium, we have valves, and we have the right ventricle. We have the inferior vena cava that is going to pump blood. We have the aorta, which is the largest artery in the body that pumps blood throughout the body. The left pulmonary artery, the left pulmonary veins, the left atrium, and valves, and the left ventricle. Going back one slide here, I want to go over some stuff about the heart. The atria, the left and right atria, contract at the same time, and the right and left ventricles contract at the same time, but they don't contract at the same time together. So the right atria and ventricles contract, and then there's a short pause, and then the left side contracts. The atria and the ventricles do not contract at the same time. There's a short pause. So if you took and think about your left hand being the atria, when it closes and forces blood out, then there's a short pause, then the ventricles then contract. The right and left ventricles contract at the same time. The right and left atria contract at the same time, but they don't contract together, right and left, atria and ventricles at the same time. There's a short pause in between there. And it's just, millimeters of a second. The right atrium receives blood from the venous system through the vena cava, both the superior and inferior vena cava. The right ventricle receives blood from the right atrium, then turns around and pumps it through the pulmonary arteries to the lungs. It circulates around the capillary beds, dumps CO2, and picks up oxygen and returns via the pulmonary veins to the left atrium. The left atrium pumps the blood to the left ventricle. The left ventricle pumps the blood out to the body through the aorta, which is the largest artery in the body. And because it must pump blood against the vessels, pressure, gravity, etc., the left ventricle, or as it's known, the myocardium, is a very thick and muscular part of the heart. The left ventricle does the hardest part of the work because it pumps blood out to the body through the aorta, but it's also fighting pressure, gravity, and pumps against the vessels that are trying to return blood to get it out into the circulation. Our vessels of the circulation, arteries, carry blood away from the heart. So blood then travels back to the heart through the veins. The arterioles are the smallest arteries. We have the arteries. As they get further away, they turn into arterioles, and the venules, as the veins get further away, they get smaller, and they're known as venules. Remember that blood travels back to the heart through the veins. The lower half of the body, the blood returns through the inferior vena cava, and the top half of the body that's returning to the heart is through the superior vena cava. The vena cava attaches to the heart, and this is where the blood enters the right atrium. It's through the vena cava where the superior and inferior vena cavas attach to the heart. Talk a little bit about circulation. Arteries circulation, the movement of blood through the heart and the vessels. Arteries supplying the head are the carotid arteries. They're the major arteries of the neck, and these are the place to check the carotid pulse. There is one on each side of the neck. We have a right carotid artery, a left carotid artery on the sides of the neck. We can check a carotid pulse there but we don't want to check the carotid pulse on both sides, left and right, or right and left, at the same time, because if we do, we're actually slowing down, if not cutting off, the blood supply to the head. So we only check the one side of the carotid arteries when checking a pulse with the carotid arteries. Arteries that supply the arms are the brachial arteries. They're arteries of the upper arm. This is the place where we check a brachial pulse in a child. The child up to about 8 years of age, we can check a brachial artery. The brachial artery runs where the bicep and the tricep come together. Right in between there is where you can feel the brachial artery. On the inside of the arm, find the breaking where the separation is between the bicep and the tricep, and feel in there for the brachial artery. Radial arteries, they're the arteries of the lower arm along the radius bone. This is where we check a radial pulse. We have arteries that supply the legs, the femoral arteries. The major arteries of the thigh is the femoral artery. A femoral pulse can be palpated in the groove between the abdomen and the groin. It's an extremely hard artery spot to find, but if you do find it, and especially in a CPR, if somebody's doing CPR and you feel the femoral artery, feeling the blood go through it when you're checking if there's a pulse, that's a good sign that there's excellent CPR being administered. We have the posterior tibial artery, which is the artery of the lower legs. We palpate this pulse behind the medial meniscus of the ankle. It's another one that is rather hard to find. And then we have the dorsalis pedis pulse point, which lies on top of the foot, which is the dorsal part of the foot. And we palpate this when we do our pulse motor sensory checks, when we do our patient assessment. So how does the heart get its blood? Through the coronary arteries. The pulmonary arteries begin at the right ventricle and carry blood away from the heart. This blood is deoxygenated or oxygen poor blood. The aorta itself is the largest artery in the body, and it arches off the top of the heart and travels through the thoracic cavity on top of the spine and down to the abdominal cavity, where it branches into the iliac arteries. It also carries oxygen-rich blood. The coronary arteries branch off the aorta and circle around the heart, supplying the heart muscle with blood with itself, heart muscle itself with blood. So the coronary arteries come off of the aorta to give oxygen-rich blood to the heart for its supply of blood. Capillaries. We talked a little bit about capillaries. We'll get into it a little bit more. The arteries decrease in size and become arterioles. So as the arteries get further away, they turn into arterioles. And you can see by the picture where the artery is larger, and as it gets further away to join up with the veins, the arteries get smaller and become arterioles. The capillaries are small, tiny blood vessels found throughout the body and are only one red blood cell wide. Now, capillaries, a good way you can check your own capillary refill, which is a good sign that you have good perfusion, is if you will just press on your fingernail bed. You don't have to smash it, but just press on it and release it, and you'll see it. It'll be somewhat kind of a pale look when you release it, and then you'll see the blood come back because you're pushing the capillary blood, you're stopping that flow. Then you see it come back, and that is where the capillaries are. So, and the capillaries, this is where gas exchange occurs, known as cellular respiration between the vascular system and the cells. Another way you can check capillary refill is if you push on, say, back of your hand with a finger, and you'll see it be kind of a pale look when you release it. And then the capillaries, blood flows back through the capillaries, and you have good continuous flow of blood. The venules, they're the smallest veins, now contain blood that is oxygenated and gradually increase in size to become veins. Because remember, the veins lead towards the heart, arteries lead away from the heart. Here's a picture showing you the circulation of blood from the heart out into the lungs, back to the heart with oxygenated blood to go through and be distributed into the entire body. Talk about the cardiac electrical conduction system. Here we have the heart. We have some important areas of the heart. The sinoatria node, also known as the SA node, the arterial ventricle node, the AV node, the right ventricle, and the left ventricle. The mechanical contraction of the heart is controlled by an electrical impulse generated by the sinoatrial node, the SA node. The SA node is the pacemaker of the heart. The SA node is what sets the heart rate between 70 and 100, which is a normal heart rate, 70 to 100, starts at the sinoatria node. It sends a message down the conductive pathways that tells the muscle to contract. This is known as the cardiac conduction system. So it sends the message down to the AV node, which is going to split there into the right ventricle, the left ventricle, to let them know to pump. So what if the brain fails to send a message to the heart to beat? Now think about that for a minute. So what can happen? The brain fails to send that message to the heart to beat, but the heart can generate its own electrical impulse because cardiac muscle cells have a unique property called automaticity. Automaticity. It is what allows the heart to generate its own electrical impulse through the cardiac muscle. That's what makes cardiac muscle, yes, it's a smooth muscle, it's a specialized smooth muscle, it's involuntary, but it can generate its own electrical impulse if the heart forgets to start up. So we're pretty lucky there, but we also are only limited to so many startups. Talk a little bit about the functions of blood. Functions of blood help in fighting infection, transporting oxygen, transporting carbon dioxide, controlling our pH balance, transporting waste and nutrients, and it also aids in clotting coagulation. Helps with coagulation. So the composition of blood, the adult human has roughly 5 to 6 liters of blood in it. Blood is made up of plasma, red blood cells, which gives it its color, white blood cells, and platelets. Red blood cells give it its color, helps carry oxygen to the organs, and carry carbon dioxide away from the organs. White blood cells, also known as leukocytes, make up approximately 5% of the total blood. White blood cells are involved in destroying microorganisms because they help, they're the defense against infection. They also produce antibodies which help the body resist infection. One of the problems, though, is if the white blood cells outnumbering the red blood cells, we have a disease process of leukemia. Because we want more red blood cells to be able to deliver the oxygenated blood to the body. But if we reverse that and we have more white blood cells, we have a lack of red blood cells to circulate oxygenated blood through the body. Plasma makes up approximately 50% of the blood. It's the fluid that carries blood cells and nutrients. It's a watery, salty fluid that makes up about half the volume of blood. It carries red blood cells and white blood cells. Platelets also are essential for formation of blood clots. Platelets are fragments of specialized cells that release factors needed to form blood clots. So if we have a cut or a scrape, or we need it to coagulate, to clot up, to stop from bleeding. And plasma helps that in order to move the byproducts through the body. And then our spleen, we hear a lot about the spleen, but we don't really understand exactly what it's for. But it's a solid organ that's located under the left rib cage, inferior to the diaphragm, and it is a filter for blood. And it's particularly susceptible to injury from blunt trauma due to its location. And it can lead to severe internal bleeding. Not only does it filter blood, it's also a reservoir for blood, that if we lose blood, it can be replenished through the spleen. So that's the end of part 3 of 4 parts of the human body.